Alright, as far as the rotors are concerned, I've got a earlier GT350 rotor atop a 2020 GT500 rotor. I say earlier because it's cross-drilled, and I think everybody knows they eliminate them in later years. But dimensionally, the rotor is the same thickness, the height of the hat to the rotor faces. But I want to put them on the scale to illustrate the differences. So this is a GT350 rotor to start. Let's see, 29.6 pounds. Also, if you look at the bolt holes in the hat, you're going to have at least 5, like on the GT350, but on the GT500, they doubled the number of holes. I guess it worked good for lightning, and they could use every bit of it. But let's see how much this weighs. It's way heavier. There we are. 42.8. She's heavier, larger in diameter, and face to face, thicker dimension. I'll get all those numbers, but clearly different than the 350. Calipers, 2020 GT500 in the foreground, same color as the GT350R caliper, and the standard GT350 in the back. And while we're upside down here, what comes to mind right in front of your face is the width of the bridge that spans from one side of the caliper to the other. Is much thicker on the 2020 than on the earlier GT350s. Something I find interesting, this new bad boy is made in Mexico, while the older or GT350 calipers are made in Italy. The bolt hole diameters are the same, about 555 thousandths, and they're within a couple hundred thousandths from face to face, the thickness, which is important for the bolts. And I guess I'll get to that in a bit. If I turn around, the pretty side, the shiny side up, you can see right away the 2020 caliper GT500 is longer. It's wider than the 350. Again, the bridge is thicker. And if you look at a side view elevation, it's taller. So why don't we get it on the scale right now? The 2020 GT500 caliper, bare. Obviously no pads, let's see. We're looking at 15.6 pounds for the new one. And the old caliper, or the 350 caliper, let's see. Bare. Oh, come on, it's not that light. £11. Big difference between the two. Next up, I wanted to compare the hubs between the 2020-500 and a typical GT350. Now, you may notice right off the bat the studs are longer. I believe when AutoNation ordered this, the VIN that they used, because these are kind of hard to find right now, was for the 001 car that was sold at auction, the green one. So you have a longer stud, which from the face of the flange where the wheel hub mounts to the end of the stud is 2.6, almost 2.7 inches, whereas on the 350, that same dimension from the face to the end of the stud is like 1.73 inches. The flange of the hub is the same between the two. I thought that might vary, but it doesn't. It comes in at 472 thousandths on both. Now, the one that's critical and of interest to, I think, everybody is the dimension from the face where it's actually the rotor. I've been saying the wheel, but it's the rotor and then the wheel on top of it. From that face to the face of the hub body that mounts to the knuckle. So it'd be this distance right here. That's the same, 1.691 inches. So it's a match between both hubs. That, in conjunction with the diameter around the bearing being the same, means that you can put either hub in either knuckle. I've tried them, they both fit, and the bolt centers for the hubs line up. You have to clock them properly in order to get them to line up, but you could use either one, and the bolt holes are the same diameter, thread pitch, what have you. The knuckles. The foreground, the GT500 from 2020. I believe it's a high caster trail knuckle, and the earlier 350 knuckle. You have to look carefully, but typically what you see are thicker bosses on the GT500, marked everywhere, where if you look at the corresponding area in the 350, it's different. You'll see round bosses where the calipers mount versus a square boss where the dust shield, I believe it is, mounts. You see how it's out here in space. You see how it's stepped down on the 350. Now, there's apparently some geometry changes. It'd take me a bit more to dimension or measure that, but I believe they are indeed there. If I flip them over on the other side, it's the same thing. There's numerous areas where you see scalloping, for example, where on the 350 you didn't have that. You see, where is it? Again, round boss, square boss, and from the underside, let's see how, in some spots there's just lightning taking material out. You put your finger in there, right here, and on the that's the 500 on the 350. So in general, when you look at it, they tried to pull weight where they could. They made it stronger in certain locations. They triangulated, for example, at the where the strut bolts to the knuckle right here. You can see how it comes along across the top and it's triangulated down. The 350, it's kind of scalloped a bit more in the middle, but as it comes across, there's not much triangulation at all. So I'd say in a general sense, this knuckle appears to be stronger. Swappability to the earlier cars, again, that's going to depend on the dimensions. But again, the bolt centers look to be the same for the hub. So that works, and I suspect, I haven't looked at it yet, that the centers would be the same for the strut flanges as well between the GT350 or earlier cars and the 2020 GT500.